Listening to the Frugal Crafter blogcast podcast, and I have a wonderful guest today. Julie Fei-Fan Balzer is a painter, printmaker, collage artist, art instructor, product designer, author, podcaster, and television and YouTube host. She's the creator of Balzer Designs and an all-around inspiring woman. Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I think you spend so many morning walks with my dog with me because I listen to the podcast that you do with you and your mom, and it's so charming and wonderful.
That's so kind of you. I have to say, I stole one of your ideas, which is I noticed at some point that you had a list on your blog, like where people could request tutorials and stuff. And I was like, that's so genius. I think you're so good at building community and like really having a dialogue with people. It's really impressive.
Oh, thank you so much. As you know, I have some questions ready, so if I sound kind of stiff and awkward, I apologize. But I think it's so fascinating to see how people make a living from art, and you have so many irons in the fire. What's a typical work week for you?
So, I mean, the first thing to know is that there's very little that is typical. And I kind of like it that way. Like I know some people thrive in routine. And I think one of the things about being self-employed in any field is you really have to figure out how to make your work for you so that you do work, so to speak. And for me, I like to change things up. So generally, like I have some big tasks that I know need to get done every week. So those things, you know what I mean, I sort of hit up. But I would say I spend 85% of my time on various administrative things and maybe 50% of my time actually making any art. And that's just kind of the way it is, right? Because even if you make a piece of art, there's the photographing of it. If you took any video, there's the editing of it. There's the, writing about it. There's the, crafting the post about it. There's the, if I put it in my shop, then there's like the packaging it up. There's the, writing up the sales blurb, pricing it, listing it, and then again, like even if you're repurposing that one painting you did across multiple different ideas, there's so much paperwork that goes into it. I always say to people, like, if you love art, keep it a hobby.
No, it's like I will be at the end of the week and I'll be like, where'd the week go? I've only done like 2 paintings but I feel like I've been right out straight all week. What did I do with my time? It's like, where did my money go at the end of the week? It's like, where did my time go at the end of the week?
Yeah, well, so in my old apartment that I lived in, I had a setup. It was a duplex, and I had my computer downstairs, and I had my like art studio upstairs on the top part of the duplex. And I actually learned a lot about how much time I spent on the computer versus how much time I actually spent making. And it was shocking to me because I found that I spent an enormous amount of time downstairs in the office and not that, there were days that would go by and I wouldn't go into the studio. And that's when I actually started to make some rules for myself where I was like, I have to do something every day. And it's actually, funnily enough, it's a little bit harder now that I have the computer in the studio to remember and force myself to say like, no, you've got to do something creative every day. And so I try that. Usually I use an art journal or a sketchbook or something because it's very low effort. It's there. It's easy. It doesn't have to be great art with a capital A. You can pull it out and you can do anything for 10 minutes just to feel like you've been creative that day.
Oh, I agree. And I have a little chicken timer. It's like one of those little those egg timers. And I will set them for like 10 minutes sometimes just to be like, okay, you got to do something creative for 10 minutes. And hopefully I kind of get lost and I keep on working on it. But so sometimes it's like, okay, I really got to get back on task, but I just needed to feel like I did something creative.
Well, the thing is, like, it keeps me going. Like, if it were up to me, I would paint and print and like make things all day long. The whole reason I do this job is because I love it. I love it. And it energizes me and it excites me. And, so even when I have those administrative tasks, I try to find a way until I'm rich enough to hire somebody to do all the boring stuff. I try to find a way to make them more interesting. So it's like, can I write a really flourishy response that feels creative? Can I, do you know what I mean? Find a way to make the photography creative. And then that makes it a little more interesting to me, even if it's just like a task that has to be done.
Yeah. And then I also find that if you're trying to like maybe grow a little bit and get a little bit better with each of your aspects of your business, then it keeps you from falling into a rut and just feeling, just stagnated. It gets you I don't know, you find the challenge in it, you find the game in it. It just kind of inspires you to keep going. Make every
Absolutely.
video better than the last video. Yeah. One thing I love about your YouTube channel and podcast is how real you are. Do you think it's hard to be authentic on social media these days?
I mean, listen, I think it's hard to be authentic in person. Like, it's
Huh.
most of us have protective layers up. And I think that that is both healthy and normal. You know what I mean? And whether it's that you want to fit in with other people, you want to be liked by other people, or if it's, I don't want to be hurt by other people, like whatever it is, right? We all have trouble, totally being ourselves. So I have a crick group that I belong to, and I was with a bunch of them this morning. And one of the women said, well, I guess I really shouldn't have an opinion about that. And I was like, but why? Why should you not have an opinion about it? Of course you should have an opinion about it. You're a person, you have an opinion, but that's just what it is. It's your opinion. And I think sometimes it's very hard to stand up when everybody else is sitting down, so to speak. So in some ways, it's actually easier to be yourself on YouTube because you're not really talking directly to, I mean, we're having a conversation right now, but most of the time, like, it's me staring at my phone,
Mhm.
and it's like, I can just be the goofball that I am and not think about it. Where, if I start singing in the middle of talking, which happens all the time to me, I do it more rarely walking down the street, which isn't to say not at
Mhm.
all. But, there's less of a psycho factor on YouTube than there is, you know what I mean, out in the world. So I think that authenticity is a matter of feeling safe. And so the internet is certainly a dangerous place, somewhere to be really careful. But, I think we also all have like I like to think about it this way. I have a 4-year-old, and I just, as a sort of agreement that I made with myself, with my husband, like, I never show it when he has like a tantrum or a meltdown or he's having a bad day or anything that would put him in a bad light. Not because that isn't a true part of our life. I mean, anybody who's had children knows that, like, that he's 4, there are tantrums,
Yeah.
but because, like, he didn't consent to being online, and I don't think that it's nice to him to have, like, people be able to bully him or see that he behaved that way forever, right? Now, does it make it inauthentic that I never show those parts of our life? I don't know, maybe.
I think there's a time and a place. You wouldn't, you walk into the bank and then give a backstory about your art, like what you were painting today. I mean, there's different bits of information you're going to share with different audiences. Like for me on the art channel, I might share about my day-to-day stuff on set, bring up everything that happened in my life. I wouldn't talk about, if my husband went to the doctor, I wouldn't talk about that. That's not my authenticity to share. And just like it's not your son's, it's not
Mhm.
your authenticity, I guess, to share your son's um, tantrums and whatnot. But I mean, as personality wise, I feel like a lot of people hold back a bit on the internet, but I don't think you do though. You seem to like just let it all out, and it's very endearing. And I think that really draws people in because you seem to have your guard down, and that's, I
Mhm.
think, very nice, especially for people wanting to learn art, which can feel a little scary, and they may feel judged, especially in real life. If they were to walk into a class, they may feel very shy and judged, but they might feel
Yeah.
much more comfortable watching one of your videos, knowing they're not going to be judged.
Well, this is going to sound odd, but I think that, like, so I've been overweight my whole life. It just is the way that I am, and I always have been. And when you're overweight, people don't look at you. They kind of ignore you. Or like, it's very much about like your personality and who you are. And so in some ways, I think it's allowed me to be very comfortable with who I am. And so I think, like, part of that authenticity, part of that like ability to just be who I am is because there was no other choice. It's not like if I behaved a certain way that then I would be like in the popular crowd, or that because I behaved a certain way, do you know what I mean? Suddenly I would just be like everybody else. I was sort of always sticking out like a sore thumb. And so I think, like, that's, I don't know, a benefit, a side effect, but it's part of who I am and kind of always will be. Is that, there was this old Dita Von Teese quote that I've always loved, where she says, you can be the juiciest peach in the bowl of peaches, and somebody comes by and he just doesn't like peaches. And it's just a reminder to you that like the people who are meant to like you, and the people who don't are repelled by you. And that's great. Like you don't need to be liked by everybody. You know, it's the same thing as like I once heard a comedian say when he was asked, how do I find my audience? And he said, you don't find your audience. They find you. And like the people who like you stay and the people who don't go. And that's the way it should be. And that's the thing that I always think is so funny when you do get negative comments on YouTube or anywhere else. Because I'm always like, so you hate watched this entire video and then took the time to like log in and write a mean comment? Like, what are you doing with your life? Go towards things that you like. Why are you going towards things that you don't like? That's just crazy.
Yeah, but thanks for the engagement, random person on the internet. Another thing I really love that you do, and I'm looking at it right now, is you keep your studio real. Like you show what's going on, how you work. And I always love watching your studio snippets videos because it's like, oh, what she got over there? You know, I love seeing how you have everything stored and it just looks so easy to get to everything and accessible and fun. It's like, oh my word, I would just love to play in there for a day because everything, it looks so tempting and it's just out where it can be gotten to. Could you talk a bit about how you designed your studio? Because you did get a chance to start from scratch recently, didn't you?
I did. So I have the attic of our house, and which is a wonderful thing. And so I was really able to think about how I wanted it. So I will just say that for me, the studio is always going to be practical over pretty. I love those magazines where they show like Pottery Barn cabinets and like gorgeous, you know, huge countertops and like fabulous built-in cabinets. And I drool over like all of these things. I just can't work like that. If it has to be put away like that, I will never do it. And if I can't see it, I won't use it. So the way this is kind of going to be a very long answer to your very short question, but if not on a podcast, where else can you ramble? So I started my art life in New York City, which is much smaller space than I happen to have now. And so because of that, I really like developed a clear system of where everything was, because it was like a rabbit's warren. Like everything had to be, you know what I mean, in tiny little spaces to find it. And what I really found worked for me during that time period was drawers. Because drawers are such a perfect solution. It's a container that you don't have a lid to, you don't have to close, you don't have to remove anything, you know, from on top of it to get to it. And yet you can sort by however your brain works. You know what I mean? So, and I could also, even in New York, like put a drawer somewhere, and then I have a drawer system where you can take the whole drawer out. So I could take the drawer over wherever I wanted it to go. So like jewelry making tools, polymer making tools, like whatever it is that you're into that day, right? And so when I had the chance to develop the attic space, the one negative, which you can probably see above my head, but of course, since we're on a podcast too, just to know, is there are no flat walls in the studio. It's basically all like walls that come up to like maybe if you're standing like maybe chest height, that's the highest of a wall. And then everything sort of comes in at many angles. This is an old Victorian house. And so there's like almost no ability to have shelves. I have one shelf that runs in sort of an L on the one area where like you wouldn't totally bonk your face into it. And so that creates quite a storage issue. There are no closets up here. And so again, like drawers shoved into like all the pony walls became a huge part of the design, along with thinking about like carts that can roll, things that can move, like everything being very flexible. And again, because it's an attic, it's just a big open space. So how can I, you know what I mean, configure it so that it can be many things? I teach classes in this studio. I do videos in this studio. I, you know what I mean, do my own work in the studio, like everything that happens up here. And also I'm interested in doing many different kinds of art, right? Like as you introduced me, I do printmaking, I do collage, I do painting. And additionally, like I have done quilting and like I was saying polymer and jewelry and like on and on and on. So I have a lot of different sort of, stations, I guess is the way that I think about it. Like here is my sewing machine station. Here is my computer station. Here is my painting station. And that just makes it easy for me to switch between art forms when I'm interested without having to completely clean up and restart again. And that's something that I really learned from having a small space was even in a tiny New York apartment, I liked the idea of having stations, even if they were small. I mean, I end up working in a tiny space anyway, no matter what I do, because the mess just encroaches upon me. But I definitely found that I am more productive when I can walk to the area that I want to work in rather than having to clean and start again. And this just goes back to, I'm a huge advocate that you have to find a way that works for you. There is no right. There is no wrong. There is only what is right and wrong for you. And the most frustrating thing when you're a beginner is you want somebody to just tell you, this is the way. This is the way. Follow these 3 rules and it will all be perfect. And it's like, there are people who will teach you that, but like, it's not really how it works. You know, so much of being an artist, whether it's organizing your space or making things or finding a schedule that works for you, is trial and error and getting to know yourself. And I think the biggest thing that has happened for me in the years of being an artist is that I have gotten to know myself better and better and better because I've had to, in order to produce work that I'm proud of, in order to really understand how my brain works so that I can get the most out of whatever it is, a critique, a class, a process, you know. And I think that it's one of these funny things that goes around, right, where they talk about artists as kind of flibberty-gibbets, head in the cloud, no brain. But I think maybe it's about the thing that artists have to do a certain amount of navel gazing and really think about themselves, think about their place in the world, think about what they're trying to say. And maybe they talk too much about their feelings or their thoughts more than perhaps a normal, quote in quotes, person does. And that leads to this idea of this kind of like touchy-feely weirdo. But I think it's really more that you're grounded in where you are in the world or who you are in the world.
I used to teach at a C class, is there, you know, so he had to solve so many creative problems before he even arrived in the classroom and sat down with his watercolors. So he just automatically went to themes that other students would think were just too out there to paint, or he just jump in and start painting. There was no hemming and hawing and, you know, thinking about all the different options. He just started with something because he'd already made all these hard decisions and done all these things already during the day just to get there, that he was ready to roll. And speaking again about the workstations, and because there is no one size fits all, but since beginners generally start with one thing, the advice that I give to beginners is just find a place where you can leave it out, if at all possible, whether it be a card table in the corner of your bedroom, or a little bench in the corner of your basement where your kids can't get into your stuff, or just some place that you don't have to pack it up and set it up every single time. Because it's just like shopping on Amazon. You get rid of that friction and you get a lot more done. You know, Amazon gets rid of the friction, so we buy all the stuff. If you can get rid of that friction between you and making art, then you're going to be making art rather than spending all your time setting up and cleaning up. And that workstation comment that you made really reminded me of that, just having a place to do it. So how many videos do you post on YouTube a week? It seems like there's a couple at least.
Just 2.
2?
I usually just I usually just post a studio snippet on Tuesdays and then a podcast on Thursdays. It's sort of a new to me schedule because I used to be a lot more itinerant about it and just sort of post whenever. But I will say that my 4-year-old came like a bowling ball exploding into my life. And I've actually had to be a lot more scheduled than I normally would be, because it's just, you know, it's hard because I'm actually juggling like another human being with everything else.
Oh yes, I know. When my twins came along, I had a studio downtown where I was teaching full time, and I had a 16-month-old, and I was like, I can't do this with 3 kids. So when I was about 6 months pregnant with the girls, I'm like, okay, I got to close the studio, get this done before I am any larger, and then start working from home, because it's like I can do it with 1 but not with 3 little ones. And he wasn't 4, he was you know, I could contain him in a stroller to get him there, and then I had someone sitting with him when I worked. So I was like, yeah, it's amazing how much the introduction of a child, or even a pet, I think for that matter, if you got a new puppy or anything like that, can really disrupt your week. The thing that's nice about the studio snippets is that you could, if you're into something one week, you can base it on that, if you're into something different. And it still kind of falls in that like fun, mixed media, low stakes, come on, let's play in the studio and have fun type of box, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking, so you sent me some of the questions before we started, and one of them was like, what are your favorite videos to make? And I was like, this is actually a funny thing because it's much more about what are my favorite videos to watch.
Oh.
Right? Because I don't know, to me, like making any video is pretty much the same. It's unless it's like a really tedious, like process of some kind that requires insane editing. But I know that when I visit YouTube, the kind of videos I like to watch are the ones where people have either one of two things, which is either they're giving some really interesting philosophical or historical point of view on art making. Like that's always interesting to me to learn something new about art history, or to learn like why we should use, warm colors here and cool colors there, or why, do you know what I mean? Your palette should be divided, whatever it is. Like I find that stuff fascinating. And then the second thing I really like is basically kind of studio vlogs, like a peek into somebody's project, what they're working on. You see it over time, you see things happen, and then for my tastes, I am not a huge like chatty person. And so I watch almost all YouTube videos on 2x speed. And it's also the number one criticism that I get from my videos is that they're too fast. Which I always think is funny because I'm like, every video on YouTube is so slow. I'm going to punch myself in the face. But I know that we all like learn differently and think differently, but I just needed to go fast. And, so I think I make the kind of videos that I want to watch is the way I would put it, rather than what's fun for me to make. Because I think it would be really easy to churn out 100 technique videos. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. This is how you do this. But I find those videos a lot less interesting to watch. And so it's a little bit harder, I think, when you have to really think about whys and prepare like history and think through like a slideshow of something. And I love those videos. They're my favorite.
Oh, nice. I really enjoyed that book club series that you did. It was just kind of fun to see another artist respond to the techniques of another artist, going through and trying their hand at them. I thought that was really unique because I don't think I've seen a book review on YouTube before where the artist actually went through a book like it was a class, and he showed what they got from the experience, what they got from doing the lessons. And that, I mean, man, I bet that sold 100 books when that video went up, because it made it very enticing. And it's like, oh, that's so cool. Just to see that, like, instead of just flipping through and saying, this is here, this is what this looks like. It's like, oh, this is what you got from it. This is so much more valuable.
Yeah, I think that I am a very practical person, for better or for worse. So I'm the kind of person who, like, if something bad happens, I'm like, we've got no time for whining. Everybody be quiet. What is the plan? How are we going to get through this? And that's just like my coping mechanism with everything is practical, So it's the same, I think, with, how I teach or how I think about art, or even how I read a book, which is I'm interested in, what am I taking out of this? What can I learn from this? And I think part of that is, I was raised by a fairly introspective mother who, when you would come home from school, crying. And she would say, okay, that stinks. What are you going to do about it? And so every problem was a moment to find a solution. And so I think that, like, it kind of made sense to me when I read books. I'm like, this is what you should do, is not just sort of look at it, but you should actually try to figure out, like, can you take away from it?
Oh yeah, that's excellent advice, because I think every setback can be an opportunity. And I think I've made so many of my best decisions in my business just out of spite because something didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. I had I'd done a class for Craftsy, which was an amazing experience, and I couldn't wait to go teach another one. And I had one lined up. It was just getting ready to go to the green light process, and they got bought and they canceled everything. And I was so mad that I'm like, well, I'll show them. I'm starting my own school where I'm going to teach my own class, and I'll teach what I want and not what they tell me to to teach. But instead of like getting, I mean, I licked my wounds for a couple days and I'm like, you know what? Let's just do it myself. And I had an idea for a book. And when I got shot down, I'm like, well, you know what? I'm starting a blog and I'm going to put what I want to put in my book right in the blog. So I'll show them, I'll give it away for free. So it's, yeah, I think that if you can take a step back and say, okay, how can we turn this into a positive? I mean, not to be all like,
Mhm.
toxic or false positive or anything, but actually get something from the experience. It's a good way to
Yeah.
live.
I think that, listen, I think there's a time for wallowing, and I certainly have wallowed. I had a conversation with my mother today. So the quick group that I was talking about earlier, like we met at this woman's studio, and it was hands down the most beautiful, amazing studio I have ever seen in my entire life. And I literally said to her within 10 seconds of walking in, I was like, I'm insanely jealous right now. I cannot hide it. This is the most amazing space I have ever seen in my entire life. It was like out of a magazine or a movie, or like, it was like the
Wow.
best artist studio in the whole world. And I had asked her if I could take some pictures, and she said sure. And then I sent one of the pictures to my mom, and I was like, check out this amazing studio space. Like, I'm so jealous right now. And so I was talking to my mom afterwards on the drive home, and she was like, you shouldn't be jealous. Like, you have a great studio, comparison is a thief of joy. But I was like, Mom, I know all those things, but let me wallow in the jealousy for a
Aw.
moment, like it's okay to be jealous. And like, I do think like all those things, it's okay to be upset. It's okay to feel a setback. It's even like, this happens to me all the time when I'm making art. It's okay to have ruined your art that you like so much 5 minutes ago. It's okay to be stuck. It's okay to feel like you're bad at it. The problem comes, like they say, when you don't get back on the horse, when you let that defeat you. So I don't ever have a problem with wallowing or wading through it or feeling your feelings. What I do have a problem with is, I think that it's important to remember that the best stuff usually comes after perseverance. The best stuff comes when you keep going. And the incredible ego you have to think that you can sit down with a very short amount of experience and paint, draw, color, whatever, as well as somebody who has 20 years of experience, is shocking to me always, because the answer is, of course it's hard. No matter how easy that person makes it look, of course it's hard. There's the famous story about Picasso, where a woman walked up to him at a bar. This is probably not real, but I've heard it a million times, and says, will you draw me something, Mr. Picasso? So he draws a quick sketch on a napkin, passes it across the bar to her, and says, that'll be $30,000. And she says, what? This took you like 30 seconds. And he says, no, this took me 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yeah,
I
I've
think
heard that
that's
story
true.
too.
Right? Some various
Yeah.
version of it, right? Everybody's heard that story, because I think, again, it's about the idea of like that thing they say, the master has failed more times than the beginner has ever tried. And every time I'm bad at something, which is every day, every time I'm struggling, which again is every day, every time I'm doing those things, one of the things that makes me feel better is a reminder to myself that this means that I'm pushing myself to a place that's uncomfortable. And the next time I do it, it'll be a little bit easier, a little bit easier, and a little bit easier. I'm not usually a fan of like sort of gurus, but I really do like James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. And one of the things that he talks about is he talks about this ice cube, which thing that I've always loved, which is if you put an ice cube in a room and you slowly raise the temperature by 1 degree, let's say you started, at 0 Fahrenheit and you keep it going up, nothing will seem to happen to the ice cube for quite a long time, right? Until you reach 32, 33, and suddenly it's melting, right? And he said that's the thing with improvement, which is you are improving. You're doing those degrees, but it doesn't seem like anything's happening, just like the ice cube. But then suddenly you have that freezing point, right, that you pass, or that warming point that you pass, and then the change does come. And I think I hold fast to that idea that if you are thoughtful and persistent, because I don't think like blind-headed persistent of just doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result works. But I do think being thoughtful, considering your work, thinking about, where you exist in the world, thinking about like where you need to improve, all that kind of stuff, like you get rewarded for it. It may just not be at like the moment that you wanted to, or so I keep telling myself.
Yes, absolutely. You mentioned Picasso and the it took 30, 50 years, so
Yeah.
that's why that's the price.
Yeah.
Do you struggle with pricing your artwork? That's something that I have such a horrible time with, pricing physical artwork. Are you just naturally, this is the price? Uh,
So I use a formula because it is hard, I think. So I totally use a formula. So basically, what I usually do is I do a square inch. I charge by the square inch. And then I add in shipping. If there's shipping, right, I try to guesstimate around what that's going to be. And then I also try to add in if it's like canvas versus paper. Do you know what I mean? If there's like some sort of big
mhm.
expense in it, if I used like a lot of gold mica or some other really expensive product in it. And so what I find is the formula helps me to know if somebody says it's too expensive, helps me say, no, it's not, and not feel any need to justify it because I didn't make up the price. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's based on something real. And I think the other thing is, I sell most of my work through my own shop, but I do sell some at like shows where the gallery will, or whoever's putting on the show will take a percentage.
Mhm.
And so that also makes me make my work thoughtfully priced because you can't change it just for the show. If something costs
Yeah.
$800 and the gallery is taking 50%, you can't suddenly be like, now it's $1,600 because you still want your 800. So you have to really
Mhm.
think about like what is what you can get out of it. And then I think people forget about shipping because like paintings can cost as much to ship as they might, cost regularly to make. It's really expensive to ship a painting. And that's why a lot of artists ship them like rolled up and then you have to have them reframed, you know what I mean? When you get them, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, and the bigger the work, just the crazier, the prices. So yeah, so I would say don't be surprised if for a really big piece, you could be paying $500 or something crazy for shipping.
Oh yeah, because you want to protect it. You don't want, it's one of a kind. You don't want it ruined on the way. But I
Mhm.
cringe. I cringe whenever anyone emails me and it's like, "Is this for sale?" It's like, because you don't. I don't know. It's like, I don't know. I think I always kind of lowball because I don't want to like horrify somebody. But
Mhm.
then again, it's like, do I even want to sell this at all? Because, it's like, I don't want to, I don't know. I don't want to devalue the work. I don't want to make it harder for other artists to get a fair price for their work,
Mhm.
but,
Right.
I also want to give people a good deal. But it's, yeah, I absolutely
Yeah.
hate pricing my artwork with a passion.
This 100% used to be me, 100%. And people would offer or they'd want a commission, and I'd be like, oh, and I just kind of ignored the email until it went away. And I walked away from a lot of stuff. But then I think now that I'm the breadwinner for our family, and my husband is in school and we have a child, and it's like the fear of not being able to pay our mortgage, has made me more strident about it. And then, and I know this because you said underpricing other artists, but I do remember being told by an older artist at some point that if you can't do it for yourself, then maybe you can think of other people when you're pricing your work. And that, remember, you're super talented. And if you sell your work for nothing, then people come to expect that they can get
Mhm.
original artwork for nothing, even if it's just a fun hobby for you. So you don't need to charge ridiculous prices that gouge people. Almost all my work is, under $1,000. Most of it is, in fact, under like $200 or $300. It's very affordable, but I think that people are always surprised by, oh, I have to pay for this. I remember one time I was sketching somewhere and some guy was like, that sketch is so great. If I give you $10, will you make me a sketch? And I was like, no, and he was very offended. And I was like,
Mhm.
if I give you $10, will you write me a business plan and draw me a logo for my website? Probably not.
Mhm. Yeah, it's tricky because when you do something you love, I think people often expect you to not care if you're paid for it or not because you get to do what you love, which that's stuff that I would do whether but I mean, to be absolutely clear, I make such a tiny percentage of my income from sales. It's mostly classes, and YouTube advertising and stuff. So it's not
But
a
even
huge
if you
factor.
do what you love,
Yeah.
it's like lawyers
Yeah.
probably love what they do. Doctors probably love what they do. My
Mhm.
contractor probably loves what he does,
Mhm.
but they all get paid. And they all get
Mhm.
paid real money. You know what I mean? And I think that that is, I don't mean to come across that it's all about the money, because it certainly isn't. But I do think that there is a tendency to feel like artists should want to give you their work for free or a reasonable price, that artists should want to cut you a break, that artists should want to do those things. But you so rarely go to the doctor's office and ask for a break, because you assume that those are regimented prices, that those are prices that are made by some big corporation or whatever. And that's why having a formula, I think, is really helpful for me, because it makes it that thing where it's like the price is the price.
I read a beautiful article by I don't know if you know Margot Potter. She designs jewelry and whatnot, and she wrote this article that I read about the time. It was probably around 2012, somewhere between 2012 and 2015, and I was doing a lot of free DT work and
Yeah.
just kind of getting real burnt out. My kids were little, and I'm just like, why am I doing this? I'm spending so much time, basically working for product and. She oh, snow just fell off the roof and hit the bulkhead. I don't know if it came over the podcast or not, but she wrote an article that was like I will not work for glitter, basically, and it really put a lot of that in perspective. And I thought that was I'd never heard it. I'd never heard that before,
Mm-hmm.
basically, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone else was like, "Oh my gosh, you're on a design team, you're so lucky," or "Wow, you
Right.
got some free products, you're so lucky." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am lucky, but I'm also broke, so." I'd like to make some
It's
money
a
with all this
lot of
time I'm
work.
putting in.
It's a lot of work. And I
Yeah.
think, like, again, if you're doing some of that stuff for fun or experience, it's great. But like if you need to make a living, it's different. I got an email today and I sent a very rude email back, which is unlike me, but I'm old now. I just had my birthday and I'm fed up. So what I was gonna say
You're quite a
is,
bit younger than I am.
I doubt it. I bet we're the same age. So this person, whoever it is, wrote and basically said, like, we're a $7 million a year company. We're so great, like, blah, blah, blah. We'd like to offer you this product in exchange for a campaign. We do a video and da 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 da. And I just wrote back, ha ha ha. You're a $7 million company and you want me to work for a product? This has to be a joke, right? Because I was like, what? Are you kidding me? You brag about the fact that you are this, $7 million company and you want people to work for product. It's insane. These are people this is a job, like pay people for their jobs.
Wow. I wonder if they're going to email you back. That would
I
be,
doubt it. I strongly doubt it.
oh, or I'm surprised they didn't give you like an affiliate scheme or something to join and all of that. I get a lot of those emails and it's like, oh, no
Mm-hmm.
thanks. But yeah. So bringing it back to art, what supplies are you loving right now?
So wet strength tissue paper is something that I really love. So I do a ton of gelatin printing and then turn that paper into collage. And there are two things that are important for gelatin printing, which is you want paper that is really strong, meaning it's not going to rip off the plate, and that also, I think the second quality is you want something that can take a lot of moisture and layers, etc., because I like to work in many, many layers. And wet strength tissue paper does just that. And then for collage, personally, I prefer to collage with really thin papers where it almost becomes part of the background and you can't quite tell whether it's part of the background or not. I also like the effect that like deli paper and tissue paper give, where when you get them wet with gel medium, they go transparent, or not totally transparent, more like translucent, but mostly, especially on light colors, so that it almost looks like you did whatever you did on the gelatin plate directly onto your work. And what wet strength tissue paper does is it takes the best of tissue paper and kind of mixes it with the best of deli paper, which is to say deli paper is really, really strong, but it has a waxy finish. And
Mhm.
tissue paper is nice and absorbent. So you can use a lot of wet mediums, watercolor, all sorts of stuff with it, but it like totally disintegrates and falls apart
Mhm.
with the application of too much water, right? And even like Japanese rice paper also has that problem where it's sometimes like if you get too much sumi ink or whatever else on it, it tends to disintegrate a little bit. wet strength tissue paper is magic. It can be wet and it doesn't rip. It like is actually actively hard to tear. It's an amazing stuff, but it's still absorbent. So you can still use all these different wet mediums. It takes a beating. The one negative is that it pretty much is like hard to get in America. You have to usually order it from the UK, or you have to order it third party, which means it gets jacked up because they order a boatload of it and then package it into smaller packages and then upcharge you for the convenience of it, because obviously they have a business and they need to make money. So it is more spendy than rice paper or deli paper or regular tissue paper. But I finally bit the bullet after trying it once and bought straight from the UK like a huge thing of it, which I will have for the rest of my life, clearly, because it's a lifetime supply. We'll see if my personal goal to work through it. But I love it. Obsessed. Totally obsessed with it. On the sort of, sorry, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, what is it made for? Like florists, or like what is it designed for originally?
I don't know. It's called like, I think like the brand name is like Carnival Wet Strength Tissue Paper or something like that, which makes me think that obviously, you know, it was some party supply thing just because of the word carnival, but I could be making that up. So that's not true. The rumor didn't start here. I don't actually know. I have no idea. It's a great question. But it is great for like, if you're a printmaker for chine-collé prints, which is where you print at the same time that you're collaging. So you need a really thin paper for that.
Wow.
And stuff. So there are just so many applications for it, and its strength is amazing. I was going to say on a kind of less difficult to get side of things, a paper trimmer I've been using a lot actually is the Tim Holtz media trimmer. And the reason for that is, so when I teach, I often have to cut paper down, or even just for myself, I buy big sheets of paper and I have to cut it down. And it gets really tedious at the paper trimmer, one piece. You know what I mean? And sometimes those guillotine trimmers, like they constantly are unsharp. You constantly have to like, you know, sharpen them, and like they get it off. And what I found is the Tim Holtz rotary media trimmer, you can trim like a little stack of paper and it goes right through nice and clean. And it makes it really fast for me to get a stack of smaller papers for printing or teaching or whatever else. So that's another thing that has been new to me in the last like 6 months that I've really been enjoying.
That's neat, because generally when I've used a rotary, it hasn't gone through that many layers at once.
Right.
I have
Generally
an old
not
X-Acto. Yeah. I have an old like guillotine X-Acto, which must be self-sharpening, because I don't think I've ever sharpened it, but I cut through like mat board and I cut through like a stack of cardstock. But it's fickle, because over the years it's gotten like a little off. So you have to add like a 1/16 of an inch to whatever you're trying to measure, like just to make sure you're in the ballpark. So it's not the super like the most precise trimmer, but it definitely holds up to the workload. But that's a good to know. I haven't heard of that one yet. So that's awesome. Are there any art supplies you've wanted to try but haven't yet?
So I have been hoarding. This is already a bad sentence when you start it that way. Okay, so I've been wanting to try Akua inks for a long time. Everybody talks about them. They're so great. Akua Intaglio inks, like everybody loves them. And I'm the kind of person, I saw them, I wanted them, I waited for like a coupon. I immediately then bought a set of Akua inks. And now I'm like, you're too good to use. You're just going to sit over there. Right. And so they've been sitting in my drawer for longer than I would like to tell you. I may have bought them when my son was a baby, but let's not talk about it. But anyway, but I finally used somebody else's Akua inks when I went to a printmaking studio yesterday. And I was like, okay, I'm ready. And I think like this is a normal experience. A lot of times, you know, the videos that I make are not based on some great like philosophy that I have about like, you shouldn't be a hoarder, you should be more organized, here's how to clean your supplies. They're literally based on like, these are the demons. I am a recovering perfectionist. I am a buy the supply and don't use it person. I am a buy the book, but don't do any of the exercises. Just put it on your bookshelf person. Like all the things that I suggest other people do are because I need to tell myself to do them. Because at the end of the day, you know, I think that there's so many people out there who are talking about art and how to make art and how to make art you like and blah, 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 blah. The only thing that could potentially in any way be unique about me, because we all know that we walk through life with the same experience as 1,000 other people, is me. So I try always to think about, like, what do I wish somebody told me 5 years ago, 5 minutes ago? You know what I mean? What would be advice that I would want, like, my future self to come and give to me? And then I try to pass that on, because I don't know how to attack sort of the whole idea of helping people in any other way. It's like, here's how I helped myself. If it works for you, great. You know, that's the whole thing again about, like, the audience that gets you and they love you, and the audience that doesn't thinks you're a moron, and that's fine. Like, that's the way that it should be.
And there definitely is something to say about, if you want to learn how to use something or learn how to do something, or you want to hold yourself accountable, is to, like, tell people, I bought this thing and I'm going to show you how to use it. You know, I don't really like to do haul videos, but if I've been picking up things that I plan on reviewing, if I do a video and say, okay, guys, what do you want to see first? What do you want me to review first? What do you want me to use first? It holds me accountable, so I don't become just a collector. I'm actually an artist who uses the stuff. And so, yeah, that's one of the best things about having a YouTube channel, is that you got people that are expecting you to, hold up your end of the bargain, especially if you shared an awesome deal on something you bought and they bought it too, then it's like, well, you better show them how to use it now, because now they're in the same boat with you. So I think that's a very valid point.
Well, also, I think it speaks to the idea of, like, you need to find, I always tell people, don't look for a teacher who makes art that you want to make. That's actually a terrible mistake. Because what happens is you'll either go to the class and learn that they don't know how to teach you how to make the art that they make, in which case you'll be really disappointed, or you'll go to the class and then you'll make the art that they make, and, like, then you're just being a copy of them, right? What you need to do is you need to find a teacher who thinks the way that you think, who teaches in a way that you understand, so that when you make stuff, you can still be yourself through it. Do you know what I mean? And I think, like, when you say that's the way you do it, I think, there are people who, I don't paint the way you paint, but if I watch you show how to do watercolor or something, I get something out of that I can take into my own practice, And I think that is one of the most important things, again, is to, like, find that match of someone who makes YouTube videos or teaches or whatever it is, the way that your brain works. Because otherwise, I think it's like, I just never want to be a paler version of somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that people that I gravitate to on YouTube, including you, they're people that I want to hang out with, and they're inspiring, and just kind of like hearing them talk in the background. And usually they don't do any of the similar artwork that I do. I just think they're fun and engaging, and I like to see their point of view. And they might try a technique that the end result, like, I love your collage and your printmaking, your stamp carving, and I may carve a stamp once in a blue moon, but I might see how you layer some stuff up, and I'm like, oh, that would be kind of a cool background for a more representational painting I could do on top of it. So and you pick and choose these different elements from the different people that you learn from and you're attracted to, and that's kind of how you, I think, kind of hobble together your own style. And follow people that you enjoy, that you like to hang out with, that that inspire you and teach you. Some teachers are very proper and prim, and you might feel a little like, I don't think I belong here. I'm not this fancy. And then other people are just kind of like, come on, let's go do this thing. We're gonna have a super fun time. And like, yep, those are my people. I want to go do that. I want to go do that fun thing. I don't want to sit in a lecture and be lectured at.
Yeah. And I think it's like, it takes lots of types. I mean, there's a hat for every head, as they say. And I do think, like, this is one of the things that makes me not scared, but sort of resentful towards algorithms, because I think they channel you towards things that you already like, or that look like work that you already make. And so you start to feel like that this is the way, this is what everybody makes. And you miss out on so much cross-pollination. I learned so much by watching somebody do something that is nothing like what I do. I learned so much by hearing why somebody's making choices in a very realistic portrait, even though that's not something I would ever do. And I think, like, when I just see work that's exactly like the kind of work I make, it starts to get really sort of boring and static and feel like you're talking to the wall. There's a kind of sameness there. And so it's one of the things I like about seeing art in person and not just online, because you're not channeled in the same way. When you go to a museum or a gallery or whatever else, you get to have that moment of discovering something that you never thought would be for you, but it's still fascinating. You know, I remember being at a Degas exhibit, and I love Degas. Who doesn't love Degas? Nobody would say like, oh, Degas so ugly. You know, of course, beautiful work, not what I do, not a medium that I use. I'm not a pastel person, you know, but I saw one case in the exhibit that was just his pastels, right? And there was like a little explanation of his pastels. And then there were two small pieces next to each other. And it was saying that one of the things for Degas, because he liked to draw like, you know, out in the wild, as they say. And so he would have to take these pastel drawings home, and they would be, you know, messy, obviously chalky and sort of things running everywhere. So what he would do is he would sort of have a damp piece of paper that he would put over the drawing to try to keep, right, the pastel chalk or dust from getting everywhere. And then when he would get back to his studio, he would actually have a reverse monoprint of the original pastel, and he would often work into those. And this is like a tiny little, you know, thing. And I went home, and let me tell you, did I dig up some chalk pastels out of my stash, and did I try that? And I had so much fun with it. And it made me think about a lot of different things that I could do and ways of working, and how like multiples and reverses and like accidental contact. And it led to like a whole bunch of other discoveries from this random thing. Now, I probably wouldn't have been channeled towards like a Degas Instagram account or a, do you know what I mean, chalk pastel lovers message board or video. But because I was out in the wild, not being sort of shuttled, I saw it. And I just think that's such a valuable thing to have that cross-pollination.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I heard a really interesting story about Degas, and he would teach his students, and he had a studio above a ballet studio, and he would bring his students down to the ballet studio, make them look at the ballerinas and be like, okay, you need to memorize, and then go back up to the studio and do the painting from memory. And I thought that was, what a great way to hone your observational skills. So that's like whenever I hear Degas, I always think of that particular particular anecdote, and I'm like, I need to be better with my memory, because, you know, sometimes I can look at something like, yeah, I want to paint that, so I'll really observe it, but then other times I'm like, la-di-da, you know, and then I get home like, what was that cool thing I wanted to paint, and I can't even remember what it looked like.
Yeah, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, so yes.
Oh, well, I cannot believe we've been talking for almost an hour. Do you have any projects, products, or classes coming up you'd like to share?
So I have an ongoing class that's happening in 2024 called Practical Color for Painters, which is sort of all the color theory that you would get in, like, you know, an art school program without the art school price tag. And that's a combination of live lessons and pre-recorded video and lots of homework. And the classes are spread out so that you actually have time. And the idea is that at the end of the year, you've compiled an entire binder, a reference book that you've made, so that you really understand, you know, color mixing when it comes to paint. And then the second thing is Design Bootcamp is a class that I have run every year for the last maybe 4 years. And it starts on March 1st. And it's really it's again, like, I teach the classes that I was looking for when I couldn't find them. And this class is basically about the elements and principles of design, how to apply them to art, how to put you into your art, how to understand like where to place things, how to place things. And I always think of it as, if you're the kind of person who is making art that's fine, but you know you could make better art, but you just don't know how to make it like better, then I think really getting into the fundamentals does that for you. And that's what Design Bootcamp is really about. So you can find all of those classes either at balzerdesigns.com, which is my classroom site, or on my regular website, which is juliebalzer.com.
Oh, wonderful. And that color one, if people started now, then they would be like a month behind them, right? But they wouldn't have too much to catch up with.
Yeah, because classes are every other month, so you have plenty of time to catch up, because the next class isn't until the middle of March.
Oh, wonderful. And then at the end of the year, they have their binder. Do they have access to the recordings after that year is
Yep.
done?
Yeah. All my classes
Wonderful.
have
So,
lifetime access because that's one
oh,
of my
good.
biggest pet peeves, which is when
Yep.
people give you a limited time because I never do things on time. So I really want that lifetime access.
Oh, I agree. I do that with my classes too. And I notice like when I launch a new class, then I'll have people that are like, whoops, I forgot I bought her last class. And I'll have everybody like really active in the old classes. So like, well, if I'm gonna buy this one, I better finish up this one. So it's a great way to increase recidivism because people go back and they finish the classes they already bought, so they feel justified to take the new one. So
Well, it's
I think
also
that's a great
like
idea.
I think you're a different artist 5 years from now or even 5 months from now. So it's great to be able to go back and review material because you may see it now in a different way. I try to teach my classes so that they're appropriate for artists at all levels. And so, like, if you're a beginner, you're skimming along the top. But when you get a little more advanced and a little more confident, you come back and you get the intermediate level stuff. And then you come back again and you're ready for the more advanced ideas. You know, I often say to people, like, ignore this lesson if it's going to be confusing and upsetting to you, you know? And that's usually stuff that like is really deep into art theory. And sometimes people
Mhm.
are like, I need to ignore this. I'm going to keep moving to the next lesson that's practical. And sometimes people are like, I geeked out about this and spent the last 6 hours down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's stuff that I would just kind of pass by and not pay any attention to it. A couple of years later, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's actually really cool. I need to go back and check that out some more. We have a fair amount of crafters that watch this channel as well, and I saw you have a new release from Art Foamies coming out. I think I just saw an unboxing on your channel. Do you want to talk about that? Are they available yet?
Yeah, they are. They're available. And so I designed stencils for the Crafters Workshop and foam stamps for Art Foamies. And if there was a theme for this podcast, it would be that I'm incredibly selfish and I basically do everything for myself. So I design the kind of stamps that I want to have. I design the kind of stencils that I want to use. And so this release of Art Foamies has just a lot of what I call really useful stamps, things that are great to have in your stash. And if you're interested in using stamps with like your gelatin plate or with acrylic paint, foam stamps can't be beat. The other thing is price-wise, like you can get a big foam stamp versus a tiny rubber stamp. You know what I mean? And that's really nice too. And I will say there is one set that people sort of like didn't get when I first sent it over to Art Foamies, which is called the Bauhaus set. And it's basically, it's meant to be sort of from Bauhaus design. It's a lot of the common shapes that you see in that design. And each of these seemingly basic shapes, basically they can get their sized perfectly to sort of mix and match together in really unique and interesting ways for sort of limitless possibilities. So that's my personal favorite out of the release.
Sounds really versatile. I saw the sneak peek of. So if you want to see the unboxing of that, if you go to Julie's YouTube channel called Balzer Designs, you can have a look at that. Oh, and I also want to plug all of your scan and cut tutorials because I have a scan and cut and I enjoy it, but I every once in a while I get tripped up and I just go right to your channel. I don't even search Google anymore. I just go to your channel and type in the search bar of what my problem is, and you have a video for it. So I want to put that out there for the crafters that own a scan and cut machine. Where else can people find you?
So I'm all over social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everything as Balzer Designs, BalzerDesigns. I do have a podcast, the Adventures in Arting Podcast, which you were a guest on a couple of years ago, I think,
Yep.
before we were doing
Yep.
videos and when we were just audio only. And you can find that at balzerdesigns.com/arting. The hub for everything is juliebalzer.com. If you'd like to see or buy some art, which I'd love for you to do, you can find that all there. And I'm just mostly kicking around, waiting to hear from you.
Wonderful. And I'll put all those links in the show notes and video description so you can find them easily. Julie, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us today. It was such a treat for me and for the folks at the Frugal Crafter community. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.